December the 13th, 2003 in Iraq, in the town of Ad-Dawar. American soldiers are searching a very small farm compound, acting on a tip. They find nothing unusual at first until somebody notices a patch of dirt and bricks that looks slightly somewhat out of place, and underneath it is a narrow hole in the ground, barely even wide enough to fit a man through it. And inside there is somebody, a dictator. One of the most feared men of the 20th century, a man once who commanded armies, ordered the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, and stood defiantly against the most powerful military coalition on planet Earth. 9 months earlier, he ruled Iraq from marble palaces, and now he is found curled up in a hole in the ground. Disheveled, exhausted, and with a pistol he never even reaches for. So how does a man go from absolute power to that? Well, let's get into it. Now, to understand how the dictator Saddam Hussein ends up in that hole in the first place, we first have to understand how he rises to power. Saddam was born in 1937 near the town of Tikrit into poverty and sheer instability, and his early life was marked with distinct violence, a difficult relationship with his stepfather, and an environment where power is something you take, not something you're given. Now, as a very young man, he joins the Ba'ath Party, which was at the time a political movement built around Arab nationalism, and crucially a willingness to use force to really get what the party wants. And so in 1959, Saddam takes part in an assassination attempt against Iraq's Prime Minister of the time. It miraculously fails, and Saddam is wounded and forced to flee the country. But rather than ending his career there, it becomes part of his legacy and legend, if you will. A young revolutionary who dared to strike at the heart of power itself. Now, by 1968, the Ba'ath Party successfully seizes control of Iraq, and Saddam, still in his early 30s, becomes the effective power behind the new government after British rule. Even before he holds on to the top title, he spends the next decade building an intelligence and security apparatus loyal directly to him and only him. Systematically over the years, removing and killing rivals, positioning himself as completely indispensable. And in 1979, Saddam finally takes the presidency outright and marks the occasion in a way that really tells you everything you need to know about how he intends to rule. He calls the meeting of top Ba'ath Party officials, has a colleague read out a list of alleged conspirators, and has those men dragged out of the room one by one to be executed. Now, while the remaining officials are forced to applaud, it's not just a purge. It really is a performance designed to make sure every single person in that room understands exactly what is happening. So Saddam spends the next 2 decades ruling Iraq through a mix of genuine popularity, through investment, schools, hospitals, roads, and brutal repression balanced. Political prisons, secret police, personality cults that put his image on murals across the entire country were very common. And he was a decisive figure among the people of Iraq. Some actually loved him, many hated him. And so in 1980, Saddam makes his first massive miscalculation, invading neighbouring Iran. Expecting a flawless quick victory whilst the country is in a post-revolution chaos, and instead he gets an 8-year war of attrition that kills an estimated 500,000 people on both sides, and pretty much accomplishes nothing for anybody. During this war, Saddam also authorises the use of chemical weapons, including against his own people in the north, the Kurdish civilians of Iraq. Now, most notoriously in the town of Halabja in 1988, where chemical attacks kill thousands of people in a matter of just hours. Then in 1990 comes the dreaded miscalculation that changes everything for Saddam. Saddam invades neighbouring Kuwait, apparently believing the international community won't meaningfully respond to his war. Well, he's wrong. A coalition led by the US assembles and in early 1991 launches the Gulf War, driving Iraq out of Kuwait completely in just a matter of weeks with sheer dominating coalition power and force. Saddam survives the defeat, but Iraq is left crushing under international sanctions for over the next decade. And this is where Saddam really becomes a kind of strange geopolitical ghost, a leader the West once crucially and quietly supported during the war with Iran is now treated as one of the most dangerous men on the planet. So this brings us to 2003 under the President Bush regime. The United States invades Iraq, citing intelligence claims that Saddam possesses weapons of mass destruction. Well, that intelligence turns out to be wrong. No such weapons were ever found, despite the US's barking to the United Nations. But the intervention happens anyway, and within weeks Saddam's government collapses entirely. Baghdad completely falls, the statues come down, his palaces are bombed, and Saddam Hussein, the man who once had absolute control over an entire nation, simply vanishes. For 9 months, he is the most wanted man in the world, even overriding Osama bin Laden. And this is where we get back to that hole in the ground. The operation that finds him is called Operation Red Dawn, and it comes down to painstaking intelligence work, tracking down Saddam's inner circle, his family, and the network of loyalists still actively protecting him. Eventually, the intelligence leads American forces to that farm compound near Tikrit, strangely enough his hometown, and to what soldiers later nicknamed the Spider Hole. A cramped underground hiding space just big enough for one man to survive in. Stocked with almost nothing, cut off from the empire that Saddam once ruled with might. When they pulled him out, Saddam Hussein in looks really doesn't look anything like the man that would once be known. From the propaganda posters, he looks like an alien. Completely different, disorientated, a beard overgrown, and by most accounts, he offers no resistance whatsoever. The man who really ruled the country with fear for 2 decades is captured without a single shot being ever fired. Now, what follows is a trial run by the new Iraqi government of the time, where Saddam is charged with crimes against humanity, tied specifically to the killing of over 100 Shia villages in the town of Dujali following an assassination attempt against him back in 1982. He is found guilty, and then on December 30th, 2006, Saddam Hussein is executed by hanging. So what do we actually take from this story? Well, on one level, it's a straightforward rise and fall situation of a man who claws his way to absolute power through literal violence and calculated ruthlessness, and who eventually loses everything, pretty much through his own repeated miscalculations, from the initial war in the 80s in Iran to the Kuwaiti invasion of 1991, to understand what the international community would do in response, which was completely underestimated. But there's a deeper thread running through this story, how the same man can be, at different points, a Western-tolerated ally to counterbalance the Iranian influence, to an international pariah, and then a wanted fugitive, hanged a war criminal. All depending on which decade you're really looking at and whose interests were at stake. Saddam Hussein's story isn't just about one dictator, it really is a case study in how power, fear, and foreign policy interact simultaneously, and how quickly the world's judgment of a leader can really shift when the strategic winds often change. If you enjoyed today's video, then make sure you do comment and subscribe below and follow me for more. I'll see you soon.